TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right, new music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
And Ted Lasso is not a series about soccer. It's really not even about a coach. This series is really a masterclass on leadership and emotional intelligence.
Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Well, I hope all is well with you today. It is another beautiful day here in North Carolina, and this episode is brought to you by our sponsors, Ignite Management Services and Liberty Strength. These sponsors help me bring these shows to you each and every week, so I encourage you to click on their links below and check them out. Also, I want to remind you that the Qualified Leadership Book Series, which includes all three of my best-selling leadership books, is now available on my website, johnsrennie.com. You get all three books for 15% off the Amazon and Barnes & Noble price, but this offer is only available on my website. Now, this is the perfect Christmas gift for the leader or future leader in your family. So check it out at johnsrennie.com. Well, that is it. Today we have a fun episode for you. We're talking about the leadership lessons from the hit Apple TV show Ted Lasso. My guest is longtime friend of the show and award-winning author John Brubaker, also known as Coach Bru. John has written a new book called The Lasso Way, Leadership Lessons from the World's Favorite Football Coach. Now, if you've not seen this show yet, I highly recommend it for every leader. And don't worry, we avoid any spoilers in this discussion. This was a fun episode with a longtime friend of the show and leadership expert. I know you're going to thoroughly enjoy it. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former Cold War submarine officer who spent 20 plus years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Are you ready for some real-world actionable advice from John as well as his expert guests?
I'm ready.
The show starts right now.
Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today, I'm joined by a longtime friend of the show, John Brubaker, also known as Coach Bru. Coach Bru is a former college lacrosse coach, keynote speaker, and award-winning author. He's also an executive coach, and he's known for his unique approach to performance enhancement. He's the guy who helped me get the Deep Leadership Podcast started, and he wrote the foreword to my first best-selling book, Eye of the Watch. Coach Bru has a new book out called The Lasso Way, where he unpacks leadership lessons from the world's greatest fictional football coach, Ted Lasso. Now, if you haven't watched Ted Lasso on Apple TV yet, don't worry. We'll try to avoid too many spoilers in this discussion, but I do recommend that every leader watch this show and, of course, get this book. I'm excited to talk to Coach Bru about the lessons he learned from Coach Lasso. So, Coach Bru, welcome back to the show.
Oh, hey, John. You made the book sound so good. I decided I thought I ought to read it myself.
Well, I've got my copy right here. It is a great book. It's easy to read, and having watched the entire series myself, it's such a great. It's like a good companion to the show to really help unpack all of the lessons that are in this series. It's a fantastic show, and again, I do recommend that every leader watch this show and try to dig out the leadership lessons. And of course, Coach Bru is going to help you do that with this book. But first of all, for those who haven't seen the show yet, summarize who Coach Lasso is and the kind of the situation that he faces.
Yeah, so before we jump into that, I'm just going to hijack your podcast.
Which you always
There's
do.
a warning note in the beginning of the book that lets you know there are no spoiler alerts. Like there are no specific examples from any episodes in the series because I don't want to spoil the show for anybody. There is so much, first of all, it's entertaining as hell, but there's so much educational value to it. I wrote this book really to be, like you said, a companion resource. So I just want everyone to know there's nothing we're going to talk about in here or in the book that would ruin it for you in any way. So you should watch the series. Absolutely. And I don't even remember what your question was, John.
Well, give us just a summation of who Coach Lasso is and the situation he finds himself in, which is that starts the whole series,
sure.
Essentially.
So Ted Lasso is, as you mentioned, a fictitious character. The whole TV series is actually based on a commercial that NBC Sports asked Jason Sudeikis, who plays Ted Lasso, to produce. They asked him to produce. It ended up being a minute and 30-second promo for the actual Premier League soccer league over in Europe that NBC had the rights to broadcast. And he played a fictitious coach called Coach Lasso, who was kind of like a lovable sort of bumbling, I don't want to say bumbling fool, but like a lovable bumbling kind of guy. And almost like a caricature of an actual coach of any sport. And he and his co-producer, who ended up being his assistant coach in the series, quote, Coach Beard, enjoyed doing that so much, and they loved it so much. They said, let's not forget about this. We're going to put it on the shelf for now, but maybe it could become something more someday. And, like timing is everything, timing and entry point in anything. So they took it off the shelf during COVID, so to speak, at the start of COVID, and said, we want to produce this as a television series, pitched it to Apple TV. Apple TV loved the idea. And Ted Lasso is not a series about soccer. It's really not even about a coach. That is just sort of the delivery mechanism, if you will, or the setting in which what is this series is really a masterclass on leadership and emotional intelligence. And while he comes off as a guy who is an American football coach, who's in a big sort of transitional period in his adult life, and I don't mean he's turning into a woman. I mean, he's in a transitional period with his family and his wife. That's not spoiling anything. So he takes a job in Europe coaching the other football, or as we call it, soccer. And he is not met with a very warm welcome from the fans, from the players he's coaching, from the front office, from the owner in many respects. He's kind of set up to fail, but finds a way to win their hearts. And, it's a great example of just having fabulous human relation skills and winning them over through that old coaching expression that we all like to use. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Well, they initially all cared that he didn't know anything, but then they saw how much he cared for them as human beings, and were able to overlook some of his shortcomings. And he openly highlights his shortcomings, which there's a whole leadership lesson in that, John, right?
Yeah. That's the thing that's really compelling about this show is that I watched it for the entertainment value, but I was struck with how much there is about leadership in this book. And I wondered, was it the same with you? And that's what compelled you to write the book. As you went through it, you're like, holy cow, there is so much in here that there needs to be a companion guide that's just kind of spells out the leadership lessons. So is that what compelled you to write the story? Was it like a realization like I had, like, holy cow, there's so much in it? Yeah. Yeah.
So much like yourself, doing what we do, we look at everything through the leadership lens, right? Mm. And so like you and I are watching that series, and this is the first time we've ever talked about it together.
Yeah.
You and I are watching that series through the leadership lens and just thinking, wow, like you kind of put yourself in that situation. What would I do as a leader in this situation that Ted's in?
Yeah.
And my answers were very different than what he actually ended up doing. And so much so to the point that I just thought, like, I'm learning so much from him and from this show that I would love to help other people benefit in the same way I did. So I was journaling while I watched it.
Yeah.
And I am not a soccer fan, so I'll start this podcast off. Full disclosure, I do not enjoy soccer. I don't like anything where you're pouring your blood, sweat, and tears and effort into something collectively for 90 minutes. The score's 0-0 and you go home.
Yeah.
Like,
but I think
having a tie is like kissing your sister.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that's funny about this show is that because a lot of Americans have that feeling towards soccer, that you see Coach Lasso and Coach Beard sort of, saying the things that you're thinking, and so they're coming to understand the beauty of this sport, but they're also coming into it with this very American mindset. So I think that adds an element of humor to it, which again, I think, Ted Lasso uses it to spin how he affects the people in his organization. Just the fact that he isn't, an expert in soccer, yet he is trying to lead this team. And what it tells you from a leadership lesson is that a lot of times we find ourselves as leaders in an area where we're not the expert, right? That we're surrounded by people who are experts. And one of the biggest failings I see as leaders, they try to pretend like they know things. And Ted in this show is, he says it like it is, like what he acknowledges his shortcomings when it comes to knowledge. And that ends up, bringing people up that they say, oh, here, I've got this idea. Or, he ends up, listening to people that maybe weren't listened to before. I love that side of it.
Yeah. And speaking of listening, I can't tell you how many of my friends, peers, colleagues, family, relatives, all told me, you got to watch Ted Lasso. Can't believe you haven't seen Ted Lasso yet. I'm like, I don't like soccer. That doesn't sound appealing to me at all. And then I had one particular friend who just told me, I said, what are you reading? What are you watching? Well, we just usually talk about books and documentaries. He's like, you're not going to believe this. Because he is not a soccer fan either. He's a basketball coach. He's like, I'm watching Ted Lasso, and I think it's amazing. I think you really ought to watch it if you haven't already. And I'm like, you're watching it? And he said, yeah. Shout out Chris Fitzpatrick. He said, yeah, you would love it. It's hilarious, and there's a lot of leadership lessons in it. I'm like, all right, I've heard from 100 other people, but you're recommending it. I'll check it out. And I got hooked. I started binge watching it. But like, to your point, like, I don't like soccer, but I was willing as a leader to listen to the advice of someone I respect. And I'm glad I did, because it turned into a book, and, just, watching the series is a wonderful educational experience.
Yeah, I agree. It's a fantastic, and again, I think it'd be mandatory viewing for new leaders, to be honest. There's so much to unpack in each episode as the seasons progress. I really do think it's deep with respect to leadership lessons in there.
And if you're an academic dean or you work at a university in academia in any way, shape, or form, I would love to teach a class on the Lasso Way, leadership lessons from the world's favorite coach at your institution. I really think there's so much value to it. I'm trying to find a place where I could teach this like as a master class on leadership.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you are listening to this and you work in academia and you have any influence to do something like that as sort of like an advanced special course, hit me up.
Yeah, and we do have a lot of people like that who listen in. So again, great opportunity for those who are looking to, add a leadership element into an educational process, which, by the way, I think we lack in higher education today. Is we lack treating leadership as its own unique set of skills. And so again, educators, you're listening in. This is an opportunity for you right here. So
isn't that the interesting thing? We teach people how to work in a business. We don't teach them how to start a business, and we don't teach them how to lead a business.
Right. Yeah.
Plenty of college courses on how to work in a business, but not how to, or lead an organization.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So what
or ship, no offense.
Oh yeah. Ship too. Yep. Sure. So what makes Ted Lasso's leadership philosophy so unique? We've got a world of ego-driven leaders. Everyone's about winning, and they're the best, and it's all about them. What makes Ted Lasso unique, at least Well, from your observations in terms of his leadership philosophy?
He is the antithesis of everything you just described in the typical American leader. Typical corporate leader. I think the two biggest things are self-awareness and empathy. And you can lump all that together, just call it emotional intelligence. And he, at one point later in the series where he enters therapy, pretends, or he kind of puts on this shell or illusion that he's neither of those things as kind of a defense mechanism, but he is very much a empathetic leader with a high EQ who's always thinking about his people first and is willing to model the behavior with which he wants to see from those he leads. You know, he's not the typical corporate leader who, has bankrupted their automotive manufacturing company and flies in a private jet to meet with Congress to beg for billions of dollars, as opposed to carpooling in one of their, gas efficient vehicles to save money.
Right.
We're paying you for money, but we're spending money hand over fist to travel in the creature comforts to come see you.
Right.
Ted Lasso would probably ride on a Greyhound bus and, eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches instead of going out to eat on his way there.
Yeah, exactly.
He really does a fantastic job of walking his talk.
One of the things I observe, one of my favorite books is Good to Great by Jim Collins. And in that book, he introduces everyone to this concept of a level 5 leader. And he found that the best companies, the companies that outpaced, all of the industry averages for profitability and growth and what have you, the CEOs had this strange mixture, what he called, of humility and fierce resolve. So they were humble, they were not full of themselves, but they cared deeply about their companies, and they were passionate to see them succeed. And so he said that there's this new type of leader out there called level 5 leaders that are really the ones that make the organizations great. And when I read that a long time ago, I thought, oh, that's not the caricature that you think of as CEOs and bosses, right? And so in Ted Lasso, we sort of see that level 5 leadership, that humility, but also, a fierce resolve to he never gives up on anyone. Yeah. I think that's the thing that really stood out to me.
Even after getting stabbed in the back.
Yes. Yep.
His ability to forgive, not just for the other person, but for himself.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important reason to grant forgiveness to someone. You don't necessarily forgive them so much for them, but because it benefits you. You're not carrying that emotional baggage around. And he is an incredibly empathetic, vulnerable leader, to your point. And one of the ways he sort of packages that in a fun, entertaining way is he's got a real self-deprecating sense of humor.
Yeah.
You have to be kind of vulnerable to point out your own, shortcomings or stumbling blocks. And at one point, his former assistant ripped him to the media, and then he's in a press conference. They ask him, about what his former assistant Nate said about him. And he's like, he's a sharp, clever guy. I'm not surprised he said that, but that's low hanging fruit, man. There's so many other things he could have pointed out. I'm such a flawed person. There's so many other things he could have pointed out about me. Look at my mustache. He didn't make fun of my mustache. He's got this big walrus mustache,
Yeah.
And he's like, I look like a caricature of Ned Flanders playing Ned Flanders. And if you don't know who that is, it's the boss on The Simpsons.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the whole, media gallery that's there for his press conference are not laughing at him anymore. They're laughing with him because he's willing to be vulnerable and self-deprecating. And it just did a great job of spinning a negative into a positive and had them eating out of the palm of his hand, not in a manipulative way, but in a facilitative way.
Yeah, I see that. One of the things that really stands out, and you mentioned it already, is how his approach towards people. And one of the things that I talk about a lot, and I know you've talked about a lot too, is that you can't take a one-size-fits-all approach to people and leading people. So I was going to say, what are some things that you saw in Ted's approach to people that, like his fellow coaches, his boss, his players, what are some things that you noticed through the series of how he approaches each individual?
So I call it the Uber effect. And what I mean by that is, what does Uber do? You order it up on your phone. You order a car service up on your phone, and Uber meets you where you are, as opposed to you like having to like walk down the street and hail a cab. Uber meets you where you are. And great leaders meet their people where they are, emotionally, psychologically, whatever the case may be. And he's a great example of managing up and managing down.
Yes.
Yeah, he's the head coach, but he has an owner that he has to report to and answer to. And she, quite frankly, inherited a soccer team she didn't want and had no interest in being an active, involved owner. He would knock on her door every single morning and bring her a little box of biscuits.
Yes.
And he said, I'm going to bring you these biscuits each morning, and I'm hoping, we could literally like break bread together and talk about the direction of the team, what her vision was for everything. She had no interest in that. So he said, okay, I'm just going to leave them with you. Now, they were delicious. She would as soon as he shut the door and left, she would eat them and enjoy them. And then eventually it went from dropping off the biscuits to she was willing to sit down and talk. And it's just understanding where that person is. Oh, you're not ready to talk. Let me leave these with you. And, just through sheer persistence and generosity and kindness, she warmed up to him and he won her over. And you can contrast that with, he had a kind of a crusty curmudgeon of an older player in Roy Kent, who was transitioning out of being a player to all right, this is probably my last season. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. He had kind of a dysfunctional relationship with his girlfriend. And, Ted just said, hey, you ever thought about coaching? And he was just like, no, not really. Well, you'd be really good at it. Like, I think a good leader sees something in his people they don't see in themselves. And he just pointed out during that season, how Roy was a role model and mentor and was literally like a coach on the field, coaching these rookies and these younger, less experienced players, mentoring them. And just through kind of sheer example, he won him over and said, hey, I think I would like to coach with you. And it's just meeting people where they are. Some people have a hard shell, a protective exterior, and other people, just need a sounding board and are willing to share right away. And, he had that in, I believe it was kind of the GM of the club.
Higgins. Yeah.
I mean, that guy was immediately available and willing to talk and share. And he just kind of understood the individual and their dynamics and met them where they are. And there's such a lesson in that for all of us. There is no one size fits all approach, no matter what some of these quote management leadership gurus tell you. And they give you like the 7 easy steps or the 10, 10 keys to lead it. There's no cookie cutter approach, and you got to meet your people where they are.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
As a leader, you're responsible for the mission and the people assigned to you. Regardless of the size of your team, employees are depending on you for their lives and careers. For the sake of your team and the people who entrust you with this role, you need to master the skills to become a great leader. Best-selling leadership author John Rennie is proud to introduce the Qualified Leadership Book Series. This new series teaches you how to become a people-centered leader. Great leaders know that employees who are respected, appreciated, and allowed to grow will go the extra mile. These books provide real-world leadership wisdom written from a hands-on perspective. If you want to be a more effective leader, this is the one book series you should read this year. This 3-book series contains the following best-selling leadership books: I Have the Watch, You Have the Watch, and All in the Same Boat for one low price of $39.99. Begin your journey to become a leader worth following. Go to johnsrennie.com and get your order in today.
This episode is brought to you by Ignite Management Services. Ignite is led by Mike Watson, who you might remember from episode 137. Mike and his team believe that everything starts with leadership. Whether it's strategy execution or cultural transformation, it's the role of the leader to create the conditions for their people to succeed. The team at Ignite can help you develop critical habits to enhance your leadership capability and transform your business. Ignite Management is now offering the Resilient Leadership Assessment Tool. This is an online questionnaire designed to assess and guide leadership development, coaching, and team building. It provides leaders an opportunity to gain insights into their leadership strengths and development needs. After taking this assessment, you will receive a custom, detailed report that provides practical and actionable recommendations to enhance your effectiveness. I have taken this assessment myself and found it to be extremely valuable in helping me make changes to my leadership approach. Right now, Ignite is offering 15% off the price of this tool to the deep leadership audience. Go to ignitemanagement.ca and enter the code START15 at checkout to get started today. This episode is brought to you by Jeremy Clevenger at Liberty Strength. As a high-performing leader, you know that leadership isn't about telling people what to do, it's about leading by example. And for most people, the one area that they are lacking when it comes to leading by example is their health and fitness. By improving your health and fitness, every other area of your life improves. Your energy skyrockets, your sleep improves, your confidence increases, and more. But how can you get and stay fit as a busy leader? Well, you do what you've always done. You hire the best people for the job. Don't struggle on your own. Put Liberty Strength in your corner. Jeremy and his team will work with you to take your physique, mindset, nutritional habits, and more to the next level with his step-by-step, all-inclusive coaching program. I've worked with Liberty Strength for the past 2 years, and I'm in the best shape of my life, and I'm still hitting strength personal records at 56 years old. If you want to step up your game, reach out to Jeremy at libertystrengthtx.com to find out more and get your initial consultation scheduled with him today. One thing I liked about at least the way this series ran and the way his leadership style was, he sort of like he used people in their strengths to positively influence the team. And so one of the other thing, I would say is that one of the things I say is that, don't worry about, a lot of times we only promote people because they have the right pedigree or the right degree. And so he takes, a person that's like the what do they call him? Nate is like the equipment person, right? He's in charge of.
He's essentially a water boy.
He's like the water boy. And he realizes that this guy's brilliant in terms of strategy. And he recognized that and he promotes him. To the dismay of a lot of other people, are like, oh, he's just he's just a water boy, and you promoted him. And that's what I like about it. One of the lessons there is to look inside the organization and where do people have potential that is not tapped into yet, and also how can they be used to better improve the team, like you did with Roy, like you did with the one guy who was the big star. Eventually. How can I use these people to get the team to be better? And that's what I loved about that. He wasn't looking to get rid of people and bring new people in. He's like, I'm going to make do with what I have to increase the performance of the team.
And you touched on something I think is super important, and that is, first of all, yes, he played the hand he was dealt masterfully. And also he, just through being empathetic, willing to listen, and being incredibly collaborative, saw value in people where others don't. I think that's the big takeaway from this part of the podcast, John, is great lead. Like, if you're a leader and you're listening to this, you're like, how does him making the water boy and assistant coach, what does that have to do with me and my role?
Yeah.
How are you seeing value as a leader, seeing value in your people or any other kind of assets in your company where others don't? See that in great teams, professional sports teams. You see that in great companies where they find value and they see things where others don't. Now that involves thinking outside the box and being really receptive to different ideas, but it pays dividends.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what you see in the show, where he deals with the hand he's given, and he finds those gems in his people and the skill sets that are sort of untapped, and he brings it to the table and ends up building a great team out of it. One of the things I was going to ask you about is positivity. Now, he has this infectious, positive attitude with his team. And I'm just thinking, how does that relate to resilience and the ability to withstand difficult times? Because, I don't want to spoil the show, but, everything isn't always peaches and roses, and it's not in the show either. I think it's a realistic view of what life is like, a lot of ups and downs. But how would you say his positivity and his approach to having an optimistic attitude help that idea of resilience?
So, and I talk about this, I use the metaphor in my book, Seeds of Success. Like the metaphor of kind of gardening, if you will. If you plant corn every day, you're going to get corn. You're going to keep planting, you're going to get corn, you're going to get more corn. And you plant lettuce, you keep planting lettuce, you're going to get lettuce and more lettuce. If you don't plant anything, you're going to get weeds. And if you're not being positive, you're not planting anything in your people. You're going to end up growing weeds, and they're going to end up growing weeds, and that's contagious. And wherever there is a void, negativity will fill it. That's sort of the analogy with planting versus, growing weeds. And he does a great job of staying positive and staying optimistic. And I don't mean like Pollyanna positive, because times where, he is positive, but shares the brutal facts and the truth with his people. And that's what makes it genuine and authentic. There are just so many examples also where he uses humor in a tough situation. They were on a losing streak. And, a reporter in one of his press conferences says, how's the mood with the team? You guys are, I think, 0-3 in the last 3 games. He's like, lower than a rattlesnake's belly button. But our hopes and our expectations are taller than a giraffe's top hat. Yeah. Everyone's just kind of looking at him like, what? And he got a chuckle out of a couple people, but just the ability to use humor to also stay positive and, help people not take life or what they're doing quite so seriously. Because when you're taking it a little too seriously, you start pressing, you start making decisions you probably shouldn't make or might not normally make. And that's a recipe for destruction with anything, not just a sporting event or individual performance. So I think that's, where his positivity comes in. It's like genuine positivity, but also a sense of realism too.
Yeah, exactly. He acknowledges the pain in the room from a loss, but he turns it into a lesson and a learning lesson. And I love that, because we tend to, as leaders, we celebrate the success, but you know what? We're going to have a lot of losses too. And I think I learned a lot from how he handled losses, probably more than even the wins, because I tend to be, I like to win. I hate losing, and he was good at losing. One of the things I was going to mention is his communication style is simple.
And hang on, John, you learn way more through a loss than you ever learn in victory.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's like this halo effect when you win that, everything must have gone great. We won by 20.
Yeah.
No, you had a lot of flaws. But then
we don't. We tend to we don't learn the lessons in victory. We need the losses to be able to learn where our weaknesses are to shore them up. And I think that's one of the things I learned from it. I also like how he use simple communication. He uses analogies to help. Like you talked about the giraffe and the snake, but you're good at that in your message. I know you talk about kangaroos a lot. They're the only animal that can only move forward. They can't move back. It's a great analogy to learn a lesson. And he uses the goldfish, for example. And I love that he kept talking about the goldfish. And it's about having a short memory, a memory of a goldfish. But he takes
creative license there. The reality of it is in my book, Stadium Status, I reference goldfish as they have a 10-second attention span. The American adult has a 7-second attention span. Ted Lasso says, the goldfish only has a memory that lasts 10 seconds. It's not memory, it's attention span. So and that's some of the charm of the series is there's a little creative license taken with his stuff.
Yeah.
Like we should all have a short memory for failure and a long memory for success.
Yeah. I do like the idea of simple communication and metaphors, because I think sometimes we see leaders. I did 22 years in corporate, and I can tell you I've seen death by PowerPoint so many times in my life. But we miss out on this simple messages like be like a goldfish, and here's what that means. And everybody understands. And even the team towards the end of the series is like, just be a goldfish, just be a goldfish. So they understood what that meant, what Coach meant by that. So we make things too complicated as leaders. I love his simple communication style too. That really stood out.
Great organizations have their own nomenclature.
Yes.
They have their own language where if you're not in the know or on the within the company, you probably had no idea what they're saying when they're talking about things internally. Like if you're a fly on the wall, you would need some of that language translated for you. I think as you look at like peak demand, you could probably think off the top of your head, half a dozen things like, this is just, here's how we talk. Here's the language we use, kind of like be a goldfish where, if someone off the street walked in or some corporate bean counter, they would have no idea what you're talking about, but you made it crystal clear and simple for your people, and none of them could possibly misunderstand what they're talking about. I'll get it. Yeah.
That's what it means to be on the team. You're on the inside group that knows what that message means, and you're part of the family, and I think that's where you get that, the fact that there's this expression that everybody understands because you're on the inside of this organization. It's special, and I think great leaders create a family and create something that's special, and you're honored to be part of that team. And that's the way I felt in the submarine force, at least when you're on a crew of a submarine. There was a lot of inside humor, a lot of inside jokes, but you were part of that crew. You were part of something special, and everybody, we treated each other that way.
I'm amazed that you did not mention that a guy with a degree from Fairleigh Dickinson used the word nomenclature.
That's pretty good. I'm impressed.
Yeah. I hope somewhere out there, one of your listeners is like Googling or going online and looking at what nomenclature means.
Right. I hope so. One of the things you said, you have a podcast, the Coach Bru Show, which has the shortest intro in all of podcast history, which I love. And I listen to it. I subscribe, and I really encourage listeners that you do as well. It should be on your feed. So the Coach Bru Show, we'll put links on that in the show notes. One thing you said is that if you had a chance to do it over again and you had a chance to go back and coach again, that you would do things differently just by some of the things you learned from Coach Lasso. So I would just kind of pick your brain. Of course, I listened to the episode, but share with some ideas or things that you would have done differently now that you've had the time to watch Ted Lasso and see him and the way he interacted with his team and his coaches. What are some of the areas that you would like to do different, or you could do differently? What would you do?
I think that as a general rule, coaches especially, but a lot of leaders take themselves and what they do way too seriously.
Yeah.
Especially football coaches. I don't mean soccer. I mean American football. They tend to be fanatical about one thing, being football coaches. We tend to overcomplicate, and we tend to take ourselves and what we do way too seriously. As a coach, yes, it's your livelihood, and it's a results-driven profession where you need to win or you get fired. But at the end of the day, it's a game. and games are meant to be fun. And I think the more fun you and your people are having, the better the results will be. And if I had a professional mulligan, if you will, to use the golf term, and I got a do-over in my career, I would focus on me having more fun, selfishly, but also, that's contagious. So if I'm having fun, my players are having fun. If I'm loose and relaxed, even in high pressure situations, the people I'm leading will be more loose and relaxed. And you really see that with Ted. And that was my biggest takeaway, is try to make it fun. And, a lot of them bought in right away. Others, it was like, I'll buy in later against my better judgment. But once they started having fun, they played looser, they played better.
Yeah.
That is my biggest takeaway as a leader, is not to take myself so seriously, to have more of that self-deprecating sense of humor.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
Let your people play.
Yeah. And that takes a high level of confidence to do that. I think we, out of maybe insecurities, we take ourselves too seriously versus being relaxed and like, look, I'm confident in myself. I'm confident in my abilities, and we're going to have a good time here. And he was confident that he had done it before with other teams. So he knew that I can be relaxed and I can take myself less seriously, and it will positively affect the team. And I know that. And so he wasn't nervous or feeling insecure that he was not knowledgeable in the sport of soccer. He's like, I know people. And that's what I loved about it. It's like, I know people. And he did. And
I would, if I owned, or I were on the board of a corporation and I were hiring a new leader, whether it's a plant manager, a CEO, whatever it is, I would care more about finding someone who knows people than who had the technical knowledge and expertise and all the nuances of manufacturing in that particular industry. Yeah. Whether you're making electrical equipment or, any other type of firm. I think at the end of the day, and I'm going to quote the great American philosopher, John S. Rennie, at the end of the day, leadership is a people business.
Yeah.
You need to know people. And I think that's where Ted that's his wheelhouse, is he knows people. And the only way you know people is by taking the time to get to know your people. Now, who was the management guru who coined the term management by walking around?
Was it Maxwell? John Maxwell?
I don't think so. Is Demings maybe?
Well, Deming was he talked a lot about that in his some of his stuff. I think it was Maxwell that finally made MBWA a term. But Deming talked about get out to where the real work is being done. So it was
you got to walk around to get to know your people, to know what motivates them, what they care about, and also to accept their feedback on how things could be done more efficiently or better.
Yep, absolutely. One thing, by the way, this is the book, the Lasso Way. And it's the only leadership book I've ever read that has a recipe in it. Why is there a recipe in it?
I mentioned it earlier. He would bring a little pink box of biscuits. And here's the recipe page. He would bring a little pink box of biscuits to his boss. And they're not biscuits in the American sense. They're like probably a lot they're like bootleg scones, I guess, over in England. Yeah. And he didn't like the way they taste. He also didn't like tea. He thought it tasted like muddy swamp water. He's a coffee guy. He's American. Yeah, but he knew his boss loved those two things. She would always have tea in the morning and in the afternoon. So he baked her something by hand himself, didn't tell her he baked it. And he would bring her something that she could eat with her tea at tea time. She sent her assistant, Higgins, to every single bakery in the city trying to figure out which one Ted bought the biscuits from, because they came in this very nice little pastry box, a little pink box. And after they've exhausted every possibility, she's like, he can't be making these himself. And that's when the light bulb went on, like, this guy really cares. I just take briskets, I throw them over in the corner of my desk, and I tell him to leave. But he keeps going to the trouble of every night baking me fresh biscuits for the next morning.
Yeah.
And I just think there's so much to be said for breaking bread with the people you work with or work for or work for you. And the gesture of, I didn't order a pizza. I cooked the meal myself. Anyone can order a pizza or just pick up a dozen donuts at the bakery on the way in. But
right.
I labored over this for you because I love you and I care about you.
Yeah.
Completely changes how something is received. I firmly believe that.
Yeah. So that recipe is in there.
That's why I included it.
Yeah, I love it. And that was the one thing that made me laugh when I saw it in the book, because it's a big part of the show. And there's the recipes in there, which makes it fun. Again, this is a great companion piece. If you watch, and again, leaders, watch the show. I'm not getting any money from Apple TV to tell you that, but you need to watch it. Watch all, I think 3 seasons, watch all 3 seasons, learn those leadership lessons, and then get this book, The Lasso Way, as a companion piece. Coach Bru, what kind of final message would you like to leave with our listeners?
The Lasso Way is available at coachbru.com exclusively. The final message I would like to leave with you is, the old saying that I learned from my coaching mentor, and you really see it shine in Ted Lasso, the TV series, is it's not about the X's and O's, it's about the Jimmies and Joes. And that's what you always say, John. You just say it a different way. You say leadership is a people business. You could have the greatest strategy in the world, but if your people don't know that you love and care for them as a leader, that strategy will fall short. You could have the worst strategy in the world, but if you have people willing to run through a wall for you on your team, they will find a way to take that simple, flawed strategy, and they'll find a way to make that thing work and shine. It absolutely is a people business. And that is my final takeaway for you.
That's great. And that's why I love this book. It's consistent with the message on this podcast, the messages in my book. It's called The Lasso Way. Coach Bru, how can people find out more about you, all your services, and all your books? Because you have a lot of books, by the way.
They can go to coachbru.com. That's coachbru.com. My favorite project I've been involved with is writing the foreword for your book.
Yes. Yeah, 4 years ago, you wrote the foreword to I Have the Watch, my first book that I ever wrote and ever published. And I think because you wrote the foreword, it's been so successful. So that's
why I brought that up. You're welcome.
That book continues to be on the bestsellers list even 4 years after we published it. And so, yeah, your influence on that book was very, you were one of the people I talked to. I said, I want to write a book. How do I do it? And you helped me through that process, and we created a great book through your guidance and help. So
I'd like to take credit also for your other book, All in the Same Boat, because I introduced you to a great military leader from another country.
Yes.
I believe he did a video promo for your book, All in the Same Boat. And it was Admiral Jones. Personal friend of mine, Admiral Jones, the East Indian Navy.
Yeah, if you want to, that's a deep cut on my YouTube channel. If you can find the Admiral Jones video, hit me up on, DM me on Twitter, and maybe I'll give you a prize if you can find that video on my YouTube page. But one of my favorite videos
for everybody there.
It's a great Easter egg.
Yeah.
See if you can find Admiral Jones, and if you could tell me what his message is, maybe I'll give you something. So DM me on Twitter, and I have a prize for whoever can find it first. So, Coach Bru, this has been great. We're going to put links to your website on the show. We'll also put links to your podcast, the Coach Bru Show. And right, It's not the Coach Bru podcast; it's a Coach Bru Show.
Take your pick.
Take your pick. They both work.
Want it to be.
We'll go ahead and put links in the show notes. And again, I encourage leaders, go watch this series. You're going to learn a lot. Get the book, a companion piece, and you're going to dig out more of the details, more of the information about the leadership lessons from Coach Lasso from this book. Again, it's a quick read. It's a nice book. It's small. It's portable. You can bring it on a trip with you, and it's a great book. I encourage you to get it. So, Coach Bru, thanks for coming on the show again. Thanks for all you're doing in the leadership space and this new book.
Thank you, John. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, please visit our website at www.deepleadershippodcast.com or johnsrennie.com. Until next time, take care.
Welcome, explorers of the human experience. This is Let's Talk Soul, and I'm your host, Claudia Monticelli. We're not afraid of the great mysteries of existence here. Soul versus consciousness, we're on it. Spirituality versus science, we've got that covered too. Join us in navigating these profound topics with wisdom, curiosity, and a dash of audacity. Whether you're a spiritual veteran or just starting your journey, Let's Talk Soul is your passport to the unknown. Let's Talk Soul, diving into the depths of the human spirit. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.
Electricast. Welcome to Tuning Into Sound Wellbeing, where we harmonise your mind, body and soul. I'm Amanda, your sound therapy expert.
And I'm Stephen, the curious explorer uncovering the mysteries of sound.
Together we explore vibrations, frequencies and the power of sound therapy and tuning forks.
Discover ancient wisdom, reduce stress and tune into a healthier life. Subscribe to Tuning Into Sound Wellbeing today.